morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings. Hope you're all doing really well today. This video is going to be a deeper dive into the Samantha Markle, Meghan Markle defamation case that's going on in Florida. Now, I'm going to do this in sections, and I'm sorry for the radio silence yesterday, but I had to do a lot of research. So this first section, as I'm waiting for a phone call to just confirm something else before I continue with the rest, is not only a disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. Do not take my legal advice. Do not take anything that I say in this video as read. These are my opinions. And I'm not just saying that as the standard disclaimer that we all say. I actually mean it 100%. I may be full of nonsense, so discount everything that I have to say. But this first section is to explain to you a little bit of my background and why I'm interested in defamation and in this case. And this is for people who've been with me for a long time and people who are new to my channel, so that you can understand where I'm coming from, because, you know, why am I talking about it if I'm not a lawyer? I was a law student at one point. I didn't do very well at school, but as an adult, when I was about 25, I did my A-level law in the UK. I didn't get a very good grade. I got a grade D. It wasn't because I had got my dates and facts wrong, because I have excellent short-term memory. Not so much long-term, but short-term, almost photographic. I swear to God, once learned Morse code in 45 minutes, but I can't remember any of it now. So I revised before the exam, and I know for a fact, because as soon as I finished both exams, there were two of them, I went straight home to double-check the dates and the case law that I had to cite, and I'd got it all bang on the nail. But I believe that the reason I got such a bad mark is because my mind was in a very bad place. I had a boyfriend who was in prison, who I felt unjustly so. I was angry with the magistrates. I was angry with the legal system. My father had died, and the invigilator, I think, was going through the menopause, which I really sympathise with her now. But as a 25-year-old, when it was snowing outside in the November period, because I was doing mine in the resits, because I didn't want to do it when my dad died earlier in the year, she had all the windows open and my fingers were freezing to the bone, so my handwriting probably wasn't that good. I could have applied to have it remarked, but that ran the risk of failure. And my reason for doing A-level law was in order to get a place at London University on a law degree course, on a correspondence course. And they'd said, if you get minimum grade D A-level law, you can join the course. I joined the course, I did that for 2 years, and I discovered law was not for me. So my father was a lawyer, my mother was a politician. Anytime I wanted a sleepover or extra pocket money or anything, with two very powerful characters like that, they used to say to me, build your case, Fiona, and present it to us. So that's how I sort of started off in life. Further than that, I have actually sued people for defamation. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of my defendants or the case. I'll just give you a rough outline of what happened without identifying the defendants or the territory or exactly what happened. But as I've mentioned once or twice, we in our family have a couple of people in our lives who are a little bit psychotic, who like to make up crap about people, and they had made up some crap about me and my family to somebody else. That person then asked our employers to go and have a coffee and said a lot of shit for 59 minutes and 7 seconds about me, along the lines of, well, not along the lines, explicitly, I deal in cocaine, I am a bar brawler, I have been arrested multiple times for violence, for drug dealing, for drug importation. None of these statements are true. I'm a housewife. This person who said this shit to our employers had never really met me, didn't know what I looked like, didn't know anything about me, had just listened to the shit that was told them and repeated it. Unfortunately for that person, there was a defective tape recorder running in the handbag of one of my employers. At the time, my employers had just said it was a bad conversation, don't take any notice. I had discovered the recording about 6 months later because I was using the dictaphone for something else, and I pressed play and I heard this 59 minutes and 7 seconds of absolute horse shit, totally defamatory crap about me and my family. I hit the roof. I called my lawyer. he said, let's start with a pre-action letter. We sent a pre-action letter. The defendants denied they'd ever said anything of the course. There were a few more letters, and then we revealed there was a tape recording. The defendants complained about their human rights, and they applied to a particular government agency who ordered me to delete the recording because it was infringing on their human rights. I refused. This government agency said, you have to, it's the law, if you don't, you will be arrested on Christmas Eve. I pulled out the Act of Parliament that gave them their power, and I found that yes, I could appeal against it, which they had told me I couldn't. I could appeal to the magistrates in that jurisdiction. I appealed to the magistrates in that jurisdiction. Oddly enough, it turned out that in that particular place, there had never been an appeal against data protection and human rights. I appealed and I won. And the court, I represented myself. I couldn't afford to pay a lawyer to stand up in court. I represented myself. The magistrates agreed with me, the stipendiary, and said, yes, the recording must exist purely for the purpose of taking the defendants to court in the higher court, which I then subsequently did. Now, there were various applications during that. Some were called by the defendants, some were called by me, and in each application, each court hearing, you're arguing the toss about producing evidence, not producing evidence, and then who's going to pay for that particular court hearing, etc., etc. And as I think I explained in the video the other day, the ultimate application, the very last one, was before a judge called Mr. Jack. And he denied my application to have one of the defendants arrested and sent to prison for lying on oath, otherwise known as perjury, you know, giving false witness. However, he did agree to emphasise during that hearing that if the defendants continued to be misremembering, that they would face a very serious real risk of being arrested, going to prison, and that some of their assets could be sequestrated. Even though I lost that application, I then applied for the transcripts from that court hearing because the defendants were all, whoa, we won, we weren't in court, but the barrister said we won. It was in a really high court as well. And I thought, I'm going to bring them down from cloud 9 and serve them up some realities. And I highlighted the parts where the judge said, if you continue with this course of behaviour, then the defendants stand a very real risk of going to prison. Right? But it's a little early in the proceedings to be doing that, and therefore I'm denying Mrs. Hesketh's application. So that just sort of roundly, without going into any details about my particular case, at that point the defendants backed right off, agreed to mediation, and the whole thing kind of got resolved as a result of that. So there was no ultimate trial. Often in defamation, parties will settle out of court or they will agree to mediation and come to some agreement, arrangement. I don't believe that's going to be the case with Markle versus Markle. I think they hate each other and they're coming from two completely different angles. I'd be surprised if that helped. And also, having observed the characters involved, I'm not sure I could ever... I mean, if they would, that would be great for both of them. But obviously it's very, very high profile. So that's just to introduce you where I'm coming from. Now, my defamation case was held under UK law, which is obviously very, very different to American law. When I say very different, I've actually been reading up on it yesterday and today. It's not actually that different. As I suspected from the beginning, the general basic principles of defamation are extremely similar. In order to successfully sue someone for defamation, someone must have said or written or created some false shit about someone else, which has then gone on to cause them damage. They must have identified that person that they caused damage, and that person must be able to prove that they have suffered damage, not only that the statement was false and was said by that person. And so that's what I'm going to go into here, and hopefully in a lot more detail. As I say, I'm just waiting for a phone call from someone to confirm something else, and then I'll move on to part 2. And if it is going to go ahead, which it might not, I might just air this part of the video. If the person calls me and says, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that, then I won't be able to continue the video. And this will be that, in which case, thoughts, opinions, as always. However, I think that the person's probably going to say, it's okay, you can go ahead with the video, in which case it will be quite a deep dive, having done a lot of research into something that I can't actually say at this moment in time. Hopefully see you in section 2, and 3, 4 and 5. If not, just see you below for now. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, hello guys, I'm back for part 2. I have received the phone call and I have the green light to talk about this, because as some of you may be aware, the judge apparently had said that nobody could report live from the courtroom, and as a lot of you already know, Ellie Hall, Ellie Hall has been tweeting, and so the information that I'm talking about now specifically is Meghans' defence trying to appeal to get the court, to get the judge to completely drop the whole thing. There has subsequently been other things that have come out, and I think I'll cover them in another video, because each thing just has so much in it. So this is Meghans' lawyers trying to get the judge to just throw the whole thing out. As well they would. That's exactly what a defendant would try and do. There are a couple of words I had to look up in it. Nexus, I wasn't sure what that meant. Apparently it means a connection of two or more things. And axiomatic, I'd never heard of that before. Apparently that means self-evident or unquestionable. I'm not going to read out the thing because it's quite long. It's nowhere near as dry as I thought it was going to be. Having studied law, case law can be, really, really dry to read into. It's very straightforward language, and the link is in the description to Ellie Hall's Twitter feed, where she has put this information out in the public domain. So I'm discussing this under the fair use and fair dealing as it is in the public domain. Thank you very much, Ellie Hall. I appreciate you doing that, so that we can all examine it. So what I would say is there are 4 things that come across to me in this particular application by Meghans' lawyers. Firstly, it's just to get it dismissed. Now, because they are working for the defendant, Meghan Markle, and they want to have it dismissed, any language they put in that application, that's their own choice. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it is or that's the way it's going to turn out. Now, I have deliberately, over the last 24 hours or more, deliberately not watched any other YouTubers' opinions on this at all, because I want this to be just my opinion. And the mistake I think I made before was I'd been listening too much to either the Daily Mail, or I'd heard a YouTuber say, not a specific YouTuber, I'd heard somebody say something, or in the comments. So I was sort of going off that a little bit, whereas this is, I have literally read the actual, what I assume is the actual accurate document that Ellie put a link to, and I've no reason to doubt that it is an accurate copy of the document. It's a 27-page document. So that's my first take. Now, one of the mistakes I made before is somebody had said and this is what I was going off, I think it might have been the Daily Mail, or there might have been a YouTuber referring to it as Florida state law, that in order to be a defamer, the person who makes up the shit, must be the publisher. And that there can't be a break in that. Now, having read this 27-page defence to have it dismissed, it's become clear to me that it's not necessarily Florida law. So you see, just looking at it without being on the internet, without allowing anyone else to colour my opinion or judgment, just going off the actual document itself, it refers to a lot of case law, a lot of what we call in the UK precedent. I don't know if you called it that in America. It's where one side or the other will cite previous cases and say, in this previous case, cat versus dog, such and such happened and this was the case. In this previous case, fish versus dolphin, this happened. Now, precedent law is, it's really for continuity. It's where each side will present the judge with cases that they've found that are as similar as possible to the case they're dealing with, but not necessarily identical. And then in the UK, the judges themselves can bring out their own precedent case laws and say, well, actually, I'm going to apply the rule of cat versus dolphin, or a cat versus dog, or whatever. So it's not actually a written in stone law. It's just, and it became clear reading this defence that they say it's often been the case. It's always, so forget all that. They're bound to say things like that anyway and make it big it up as much as possible. But we're not actually dealing with law. We're talking about previous cases that they're citing to bolster up their case. I dare say Samantha Markle's lawyer equally has previous cases they're going to cite. So it is not impossible that in Florida, what the defence do say is more often than not, courts in Florida want to see that the person talking shit is the initial publisher. And a lot of the cases they cited are to do with stuff police officers have repeated to a media outlet that has then published it. And in those eventualities, I can totally understand why most courts would say you can't sue the police officer, but you can sue the media outlet that ultimately published it. Police officers, people giving testimony in court cases, I don't believe any of that can be held under defamation. They can't in the UK. They can't in the UK. Otherwise, no one will be allowed to say anything in court. The third thing for me is that having read this defence application to have the whole thing dismissed by Meghans' defence team, is it actually builds a really, really strong argument as to why this should not be dismissed and must under all circumstances be explored further. There must be discovery. Witnesses must be brought, and I'll come to that. And number 4, which is sort of connected to that, is it would appear that people like Jason Knorf, Prince Harry himself, Meghan, any witnesses that are called, they're really going to be the key to this. So if the judge, and I think it's Judge Honeywell, I should have looked up her name at the beginning of this, if she were to dismiss it at this stage, it's far too early, to quote my friend Adrian Jack. It is far too early to dismiss this. And I think the judge herself said that the first time she said no. Because the defence team used certain language, certain words like, well, I mean, we will be coming to that point. Right, I want that page next. That there is no provable way that Meghan was helping Omid and Carolyn Durran to such an extent. Now, the court's not going to discover that without interrogating witnesses and without taking it a lot further. So, in my opinion, it is far too early to be dismissing anything. Now, before I get into that, just to keep it a little bit more light-hearted and simple for you guys, I went through the appendix that they had filed, which basically, very briefly, has the 10 allegations that Samantha has made and the 10 corresponding defences. And I've just written down the defences in short. Number 1, their defence is opinion, free speech. Number 2, their defence is not traceable. Not traceable, meaning they can't make a connection with Meghan. Now, the not traceable bit is where I would say it's far too early to dismiss, because things may well come out quite soon, in quite a few soon hearings, that there is a connection, depending on what one witness says or another. They'll all have to get their story bloody straight, won't they? Number 3, not traceable again. Number 4, opinion. Number 5, opinion. These are all their defences. Number 6, not traceable. Number 7, not traceable. Number 8, opinion. Number 9, opinion substantially true. This is the first time they rely on a defence of truth. Not totally true, but substantially true. And number 10, no transcript and substantially true. So to abbreviate it even further, out of the 10 allegations, the defence relies 4 times on the defence of not traceable or not provable, 5 times on opinion, which would be free speech, and interestingly, only 2 defences rely on truth, sort of. So it gives you a rough idea. I mean, I was just sort of wrote that down quite quickly. And not traceable, I'm not familiar with that term. I mean, perhaps that is a reliable term. I have also watched the Oprah segment where Meghan is talking to Oprah about her sister, because they say in the defence that the transcripts were not submitted. Now, I don't know why. I have no idea why, so I thought I would transcribe it myself, the whole conversation. Because the defence relies on saying this is Meghan's objective opinion. She was never stating any of this as fact. And muddying the waters somewhat, and anyone who's ever dealt with tricky people will know that's a common thing. They don't like things scrutinised. They don't like people looking at a proper timeline and breaking things down. That's the last thing they want. And that's a big thing that came across to me in this whole defence application to have it dismissed. I'm going to move on in the next segment to really dissect why I actually think Samantha Markle has a pretty good case if the judge allows this to continue and doesn't dismiss anything at this stage. She could, I suppose, always reserve the right to dismiss at a later date, but this certainly is not the moment. This has to be scrutinised more closely, shall we say. So I'll see you in the next section, because there's a lot. Right, finding freedom. Did Meghan have any editorial influence over the book Finding Freedom? Now, as I've said before in many of my videos, we all as a group may suspect something to be the case. It may be obvious to us that that is the case. But when you get to court, judges look at things in a very different way. And when you start picking stuff apart, and I have good news, in my opinion, yes, she did have editorial influence over this, and that would make her along the lines of a publisher, and I will explain why. But in order for me to form that conclusion, and that's only my conclusion, the judge may form a completely different one, and I'm sure Megan's legal team would, I've had to read these 27 pages from her own defence, and I've had to pick apart. Now, I'm just dealing with Finding Freedom here. I'll do another section on the Oprah thing in a minute. So that's, the judge herself has actually said that she is struggling to find that Meghan was the publisher of Finding Freedom. How much of an influence did Meghan have over it? And was she even a co-author? Provably, which is what the defence rely on a lot in their... Where's my abbreviated defence is gone? I had it just a minute ago. Oh God, I've got so many papers here. Well, I've lost that piece of paper. Oh no, here it is. They call it not traceable, or, you know, not provable. Can anybody prove? Now, what can be proved is that she did email Jason Knorth and ask him to collaborate with the authors to put certain things across. Now, there's a little bit from Prince Harry in the emails that none of us are going to like. I didn't really like it when I read it, but I have to be fair, and this was in the email. Harry said to Jason, I totally agree that we have to be able to say that we didn't have anything to do with it, meaning the book. Well, firstly, that proves an enormous level of dishonesty from Prince Harry, saying to Jason, I totally agree that we have to be able to say that we didn't have anything to do with it. And I hope Judge Honeywell, I forgot to look up her name again, but I hope the judge reads that and realises there's such a level of dishonesty, certainly coming from Prince Harry in that one sentence in that email to Jason Knopf, that it's far too early to dismiss anything. Everything should remain on the table. But then Harry goes on to say, even if they choose not to use it. Now, Harry is clearly saying there that he himself doesn't feel he has editorial control over it. For him to have said and further on in the email to Jason, even if they, presumably Omid and Charlene, choose not to use it. Now, so those two things. Firstly, it's enormous dishonesty to say we've got to be able to do this and be able to deny it later. And secondly, that Harry didn't feel he had editorial control. Meghan, on the other hand, and I've got to say, I've had to do so much research into this. I haven't got a full transcript that I've read today of the full emails between Jason Knopf, Meghan and Harry. But I have found some parts. Meghan emailed, guys, I'm just videoing, please. Meghan said, tabloid stories that need correcting, batting down. Now, I looked up the term batting down. It comes from battening down the hatches. The actual definition is to bind. Batting down is to bind, to fix, sort of, to write in stone. Meghan then writes about herself in third party, which she did. So when you write about yourself in the third party context, that's like you're an author. You are one of the authors. You are now writing about yourself. Now also, when anybody writes a book, for example, Tom Bower, Valentine Lowe, Lady Colin Campbell, they may reach out to sources, old school friends of the subject of the book, or work colleagues or other people. In this instance, the authors, Omid and Charlene, are communicating with the actual subjects of the book itself. They are communicating with the subjects. I've got to stop this. Meghan and Harry are not only the subject matter of Finding Freedom, very much the subject matter of it, they are also members of the British royal family. Any author on planet Earth who is writing about a member of the British royal family and asks for information from the subject matter themselves, I think it is a given that the authors are going to include direct quotes and information from the subject matter themselves. To me, that's an automatic authorization of it. They are not only that, they're colluding, they're participating in it, they are a part of it. They are as good as dictating, or Meghan is, what she wants to go into that book. She is a co-creator of that book. And also with the parts that are not referenced in the Knopf emails, but apparently are in Finding Freedom, which I admit I've never written, the defence then goes on to say, Meghan never said that, that was just in Finding Freedom. Meghan never said that, that was just in Finding Freedom. And I would have a question directly to the judge. If Meghan and Harry didn't supply information to Finding Freedom, yes, they could have got it from school friends. Yes, they could have got it from work colleagues. Yes, they could have got it from other sources. Who told them that Meghan peed in the bushes in Africa? Which school friend would have known that? Which work colleague would have known that? How many people were watching her peeing in the bushes? Was Omid and Charlene there when she was peeing in the bushes? There's very specific information in Finding Freedom, and yes, I would argue, even if the judge didn't agree with me, that yes, Meghan was a co-author or a co-creator of that artwork of Finding Freedom. At the very least, that two budding Gordon Ramsays in the kitchen who haven't got a fucking clue how to cook. Anyway, even if the judge doesn't agree with me that Meghan was the co-author and creator of Finding Freedom, again, I reiterate, it is far, far too early for the judge to discount or dismiss anything before hearing what Omid Scobie, Carolyn Durran, Jason Knorf, Meghan and Harry and other witnesses have to say about it. Because unless they all get their story totally straight, assuming they're not being entirely honest or might misremember things, that's going to be bloody difficult to get all of those people to agree and sing from the same hymn sheet, which I believe is what Meghan and her defence team would like. They want this thrown out into the rubbish bin before anybody has been able to give it close scrutiny. Now, whether people like Samantha Markle or not, personally, I do, but she doesn't have total supporters everywhere, and perhaps the judge, maybe the judge doesn't really care, maybe the judge does, but she's a human being and she has brought this case, and the very least she deserves is a fair hearing. If Meghan and her defence team are correct, and that Meghan is 100% innocent and had nothing to do with the book other than a couple of little emails suggesting that they should put some things in, then that too will come out and Meghan will be exonerated. But without full discovery and witness testimony, no one's ever going to know. I deeply suspect that Samantha's case will actually strengthen as time goes on, if this is allowed to continue, which is another reason I would directly appeal to the judge to not dismiss anything at all at this stage. Right, the next section will go into the Oprah interview and hopefully won't be quite as disjointed as this. There is one more point on the finding freedom I want to make. That by Meghan saying she wanted to bat down, to bind certain things, she is at least hoping to exert some editorial control, as opposed to Harry saying, even if they choose not to put it in. You know, Harry, I think, is coming from one place and Meghan from another. And Mr. North had multiple conversations with Meghan about the book, and that, I think, Jason Knorf is a key witness. I think for a judge, a jury, for anybody to see his face and hear his words about what conversations did or didn't take place, those are things that Meghan then will have the opportunity to counterclaim or say that didn't happen, and her face and her body language and her voice inflection will equally be heard by the court. But none of it's going to be heard if the judge dismisses all or any part of this. I believe everything should remain, everything should stand. I'm so glad I'm doing this in sections because there's always something I forget. Now, there was another part in it that the defence said that Omid is unrelated to Meghan. Unrelated as in he's an impartial bystander, okay? And said Omid was well known for reporting on the British royal family before Meghan. I'm a Brit. I've been following the royal family all my life. I'm a monarchist. I never heard of this dude before Meghan came on the scene, right? That's not to say he wasn't a royal reporter of some sort for some publication, but in all of my life, I never heard of Omid Scobie before Meghan Markle came along. And I want the Americans and the American court and the judge to understand that, because I think without Brits standing up and saying, whoa, 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 this guy was not a famous royal correspondent to us Brits, reporting generally speaking on the royal family. Without us Brits putting that into context for the American court in Florida, I think that is a hoodwinked point. That could be taken as a given. Trust me, and I'll put my hand on any Bible you like all day long and testify I never heard of Omid Scobie. Now, he might have been some sort of, I don't know, unpaid little intern for the Telegraph, or I really don't know. I don't know when he came into this for real, you know, for real, as B. Dina would say. Maybe he was working for 10, 20 years before I heard of him. Just because I didn't hear of him doesn't mean he wasn't working in the Royal Court circuit. But I had never heard of him. Anyone else out there, Brits, British people, ever heard of him before Meghan Markle came on the scene? The only way I know Omid is as Meghans' mouthpiece. That's his reputation to me. That's the only way I've heard of him. And I just want to emphasise that point to the judge. Okay, Oprah Winfrey. The defence says that the plaintiff doesn't have a copy of the transcript in there because, and I quote, that the transcript shows that the plaintiff is blatantly misrepresenting statements Meghan actually made. And then they go on to say, it's just Meghan's feelings, Meghan's opinions about her childhood, that she and Oprah were only talking, just loosely speaking, not about fact. And this is where the transcriptions come into play. Oprah says, and Samantha Markle, your half-sister on your father's side, has written a supposedly tell-all book about you, full stop. What is your relationship with her? Now, to me, that question is key. What is your relationship with her? That's a straightforward question. Oprah's not saying, how do you feel about your upbringing? What's your recollection? What's your point of view? Not necessarily the fact. Oprah's asking a dead straightforward question. What is your relationship with her? Meghan replies, it would be very hard to tell when you don't know me, and then she laughs. I mean, this is a very different situation than my dad, right? When you talk about betrayal, betrayal comes from someone that you have a relationship with, right? I don't feel comfortable talking about people that I really don't know, but I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows. And I wish I'd had siblings. I would have loved to have had siblings. That's why I'm so excited to be pregnant, so that Archie has someone. Then she changes the subject, right? I know what she would have gone on to say, but I believe she stopped herself. I believe she was going to go on, and this is just my opinion, to say, that's why I'm so excited to be pregnant, so that Archie has someone to play with, his own age. She's trying to distance herself from her older half sibling. She says, as a fact. She doesn't say she felt like she grew up alone. She says as a fact. And interestingly enough, her defence team include this in their defence, this line. I grew up as an only child. That statement is a fact. That is not her feelings about it. She's saying, I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows. She's even bringing in third parties to back up her factual statement that she grew up as an only child. That's not her perspective. That's not her feelings. She's stating that as fact. Then when she goes on to say she's more excited, but she's pregnant, so that Archie can have someone, and she stops, she cuts the sentence short, so that Archie has someone. Someone to play with, someone to know, someone to what? Then she continues, what's really interesting the last time I saw her must have been at least 18, 19 years ago, and before that, 10 years before that, Oprah continues, so you all weren't close. You didn't grow up together. Meghan says no. Oprah says she doesn't. Meghan says no. Meghan doesn't allow Oprah to say she doesn't what. She just cuts her off and says no. Oprah, really, Meghan, no. She changed her last name back to Markle when, well, I think she was in her early 50s at that time, only when I started dating Harry. Oprah replies, M replies, so I think that says enough. Now, I got this off a CBS YouTube video, and as soon as they finished the excerpt of Meghan and Oprah, where Meghan ends by saying, so I think that says enough, The anchor, interestingly enough, says, and this is a quote, "The name change does say a lot." Ha 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 ha. Lots of laughter from lots of people in the studio, including Oprah Winfrey, who he's about to interview. Then he introduces Oprah. So the CBS anchor himself, clearly from that video clip, reads a lot into the fact that Meghans' final closing line on her sister was about her name change, "So I think that says enough." And the CBS anchor follows up with, "The name change does say a lot." And then ha 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 ha, lots of laughing after that. So I feel that CBS have somewhat dropped Meghan in it. They didn't perceive or interpret her feelings in quite the same way. Right, so now the defence relies on the vague "they hardly cross paths" and says it's not defamatory. I think the fact that the CBS anchor and probably everybody else on planet Earth saw and heard that interview, or anyone who did see and hear it, could probably read into it is defamatory and damaging and was said in a very derogatory way. The defence goes on to say that the quote, "only child," is a textbook example of opinion. So I'm going to refer back to the transcripts. So where Meghan says, "I grew up as an only child," to me that's a factual statement. I grew up as an only child. That's a fact. She stated that as a fact. To me that's as clear as a bell. But her defence team say, no, that's her opinion. It can't be an opinion, the way she said it. "I grew up as an only child, which everyone who grew up around me knows." So she's being backed up by, I don't know who, but Meghan will presumably, providing there's a chance for her to defend herself and this thing goes on, she'll explain who those other people are. The defence leans on the word relationship. I don't know in what way they're going to use the word relationship. The defence also heavily relies on Meghan's feelings and opinions. Now, the only place where Meghan talked about not feeling, but the verb to feel, I'm pretty sure, just scanning through the short transcript, the only part she said that was, "Right, I don't feel comfortable talking about people that I don't really know." There's no other place where she says to Oprah, "This is how I feel about my childhood. I felt like I grew up an only child." Quite the reverse. She states as fact, "I grew up as an only child." The defence again then relies on it not being falsifiable. So they're saying that the plaintiff needs to prove that Meghans falsified things. And unless this is allowed to continue, there's no chance that Samantha can do that. So they basically, again, don't want anybody scrutinising this. So then Meghans said Samantha changed her name back to Markle after she started dating Harry. The defence said Meghan never said that was to cash in on fame. So why did she say it? Why did she say in the interview, no, she changed her last name back to Markle. Well, I think she was in her early 50s at that time, only when I started dating Harry. So I think that says enough. Why did Meghan say those things if she wasn't implying that by her dating Prince Harry, one of the most famous men on planet Earth, was Samantha changed her name back to it to cash in? Why else? What other reason could there be? And also the CBS anchor, again, with his quote saying, "The name change does say a lot." Laughter of all the people in the studio, including the anchor and Oprah Winfrey, who he then goes on to introduce. So perhaps the judge, if she allows it to continue, will at some point have the opportunity to play the Oprah video, because as Graham and I have both said many times in the past, there's a big difference between submitting a written witness statement and for a court to actually see and hear voice inflection, facial muscles, and see the context in which something was said. There's a vast difference between the two. Ask pretty much any barrister, lawyer, they would much prefer, in certain circumstances, that witnesses only give written testimony so that they can manipulate and make it sound like something better, something worse, rather than have the person in the witness box being animated or having videos played of them. I mean, you can say things in many different ways. Your facial expression can have many different reads. Fortunately, all that is available on the internet because it was a very famous interview, and I hope that the judge is going to watch clips of it or has the full interview available to her to watch. The Oprah one obviously is a lot stronger at this stage, but the finding freedom thing, if it's struck out, then they're just never going to get to it. I can guarantee you, if the judge allows this to continue, and they get discovery and they have witnesses and they start really looking into this, that's where things are going to fall apart for Meghan, if Meghan has been lying. Oh, sorry, misremembering. I'm sorry this has been a long one. I've been planning this for about 24 hours and then on cue, as soon as I do, my family come out for an argument in the kitchen and Graham decided to stoke the fire up there. You've been very good and very quiet on the whole, as the others, or screaming their tits off in the kitchen over a burger, how to make a burger, homemade burgers. What's your opinion, Graham, just closing on this? Do you think it should be thrown out? Do you think it's a bit weak? Was Meghan the publisher of Finding Freedom? I mean, from a factual...
I think Finding Freedom was a Meghan book. She wrote it. She got someone else to put his name to it, but every single word must have come from her lips, or Harry's, in my opinion.
I haven't read the book, but I'd be
I'd
be really interested to know how Omi and Carolyn knew she peed in the bushes. How did they know she peed in the bushes in Africa?
He was the writer. She can't be asked to write her own book. She said, "Oh, get someone to write it for me. I'll tell them what to say." That's my opinion on it. I mean, I might be completely wrong. It might never have.
I tell you what, does she strike you as the sort of character that would allow someone else full editorial and her to have no control whatsoever over it? Oh my God, that burger cooking thing's really... Oh, the whole thing planned.
I hope they drag her into court and give her a good grilling.
Well, yeah, a good you mean questioning. Americans might not understand grilling. They might think you want to put her on a fire or something. Grilling in the UK means interrogation. Interrogation.
Yeah, in the witness box.
Yes, I would like to see that.
And watch them squirm.
I mean, we could all be proved totally wrong. Meghan could be the most honest person in the world, and if it's all allowed to run its course...
And if she's completely innocent, she'll have nothing to worry about.
Well, exactly. She'll be the first one who'd want it to go to clear her name, wouldn't she?
Absolutely.
That's a very good point, Graham. See, I've gone to all that trouble and I should have just have you do it in the first place. But that is a very good point. If she's been accused of all these things, surely she would be the keen as mustard dish to get it all out there and clear her... Come on, Meghan, we've got faith in you. We know you didn't misremember anything.
How was your father, by the way? How's his ass? A bit dodgy, are you?
As always, thoughts, opinions. And I'm not a lawyer, and I am full of shit when it comes to legal matters, so don't anybody take my advice.
I hate lawyers, they're not worth a carrot.
Oh, don't say that, because our mates and, you know...